So excited to talk here today about building a thriving workplace. I think it's one of the key elements to creating meaningful work. I think it connects a little bit, Laura, to what you talked about. So hopefully we can make some great connections as people think about putting some of these practices into play. So as I think about building a thriving workplace, what is it? It's definitely a workplace that's inclusive, engaging, growth oriented, meaningful work that offers a sense of purpose across business units and in an organization that brings value to associates. So just stopping here really on a thriving workplace as we transition to meaningful work. I read a quote recently that talked about how depriving someone of meaningful work is when they basically lose their reason for existence and they go stark raving mad. And this really reminds me of a teacher back in high school, and he was a beloved history teacher. He was so passionate about history. He made everyone around him feel passionate about history. And we lived in a small town. He probably wasn't making a great teacher's salary, even though that's probably just so wrong that teachers don't make the best salaries in the world. But he loved teaching. And in the summertime, as some teachers do, they take different jobs to supplement their income and work during the summer. And he worked at a factory. Probably got paid twice as much as he did for his teaching salary. But the one thing that I remember about him is he said his job every day was to take this wire and put it around the screw. And he would take a wire and put it around the screw, and the next screw would come up and he'd put the wire around it. The next screw would come up and he'd put the wire around it. And then every day at the end of his shift, he would get home. He would go home, and driving home in the car, he would scream at the top of his lungs. So I think about that and think this is the opposite of meaningful work. So when we think about creating a thriving workforce and a thriving workplace, why does having a thriving workforce even matter? Why do we even want to do this or spend our time putting one of these together? I think we could all agree if we have a great workforce, one where people are doing their best work and one where they feel like they can deliver their best work, they're invited to the party of doing their best work. It strengthens the culture, enhances innovation, improves retention, and increases engagement. And I think we could all agree these are outcomes that we really all want. And then when I think about meaningful work, what should we do and what should we not do as we think about putting it together? Because there's, definitely things we should do if we want to be successful or things to avoid. Aligning roles with the purpose, encouraging autonomy, connecting daily work to broader mission, and then just providing those clear development opportunities. And then what to avoid? Ignoring people. Avoiding difficult conversations and taking a one-size-fits-all approach to everyone and everything. And another thing I would just add on here is also just getting feedback from people or hearing voices and not really connecting things that you're doing to take action and make improvements. So what's next? How do you even build a thriving workplace? Some of us are we're all on different paths of the continuum of our workplace. Some people are starting, some people are in the middle. Maybe some people feel like you have it conquered, but what can we do? And so here are some key elements to doing that. The first thing is defining and communicating your associate value proposition. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. Recognizing and prioritizing associate recognition. And recognition, just like Laura talked about, doesn't have to be money. It can be letting people know you care about them. You appreciate the work that they do. Taking time to invest in development, and then again, fostering inclusive leadership. Just modeling empathy, respect, and being authentic. So when we think about defining an associate value proposition, we call our employees associates. Maybe you call them employees or teammates. So you can reword this however is needed. But what can you do? What steps do you take in order to make this simple? Fun fact, a lot of organizations talk about their associate value proposition or their employee value proposition, but they don't take time to define it. And at Trimedex, it was probably about 7 years ago, we took an intentional journey to define what our associate value proposition was. And instead of letting all of our associates make it up, we wanted to be very clear on what we value from as a company and what we deliver to associates. And so we started off by reviewing data from exit interviews and engagement surveys and all the feedback mechanisms that we have. And we said, okay, of this feedback, what are associates who are leaving telling us? I left because. And what are associates who are staying telling us? I stay here because, or where do they score highly on engagement surveys? And in addition to that, we also took a look at some of our key personas. So we took this data and key personas, and we determined, okay, what are the things across these key personas and across these data elements that are common, so that we can establish a common associate value proposition. And then we determined, okay, well, what do our associates value? We could have made a whole list of things, but we got to keep it simple. So I'll talk here soon about some of those elements that we developed. And then one of the other key strategies we had is connecting the associate value proposition to outcomes. And we did that by connecting it to our engagement survey. Because if we can say, this is what we value as an organization, and this is what we offer to our associates, and then we can use our engagement survey to measure those outcomes, then we can create actions and create a feedback loop. Here's what we heard. Here's what we deliver. Here's the feedback you gave us about how we are doing well or not doing well. And then here's the actions we've taken to improve that. So let's talk a little bit more about the associate value proposition. And these are the elements that we use here at Trimedex. We have 5 of them. And then the engagement statements are listed below. So just looking at these across and giving one example here on rewards, one of our values is rewards and rewarding people with monetary, but also, a real host of non-monetary rewards as well. And when we think about how we want our associates to feel about that, we want our associates to say, I'm committed to delivering excellent results that support the organization's success. And then also just thinking about the associate value proposition and thinking about, okay, well, that's great. If I can define it, if I can put these things out here, then what do I do with it to continue to reinforce this and also to continue to communicate to associates about these elements, what's included. And so when we utilize the associate value proposition, if you think about these elements across the top here, rewards, wellness, community, opportunities, and people, we utilize these icons in all of our communications to kind of connect the mind and the eyes of our associates to how we're looking at each of these. And then also we talk about our associate value proposition within our communications as well. And not really only within our communications to associates, but we also communicate this externally as we are thinking about working with other organizations, or we're thinking about commercial pursuits as well. We really try to anchor everything back to our associate value proposition and how this is really helping us create a key differential for talent in the market. And one thing to talk about here as well is outcomes. When I look back to 7 or 8 years ago, before we had this associate value proposition, what I would say is everybody was making up their own story. All the stakeholders were making up their own story about what we offered as a company. But this really allowed us to say, these are the things we offer, and this is how we want you to experience them. And then it really also helped us, again, connect to engagement. And I think it really was a turning point as well in getting improvement in our talent metrics. Everything from time to fill, because we utilize this to communicate to associates or to potential associates, to our engagement survey results, both within the results and in the participation, because I think this enabled us to be able to communicate back to our associates we are listening to you. We are taking action. And then, of course, on our turnover and retention results as well. So moving on here, it's great to have a wonderful associate value proposition, but really wanted to stop here and talk about if we don't, as organizations, kind of meet those basic needs where employees can show up, have sufficient tools to effectively do their daily jobs, it's probably going to be difficult to build upon that. So we think about basic needs, then also moving up to individual contributions, like how do we have that recognition and reward mechanisms? And then also fostering the teamwork and providing those opportunities for growth. I think it was Laura that talked about having discussions with your associates and building in a discussion about growth and development into those discussions is a great way to really connect associates to your associate value proposition, connect them to meaningful work, either things that they can explore or ways that you can help them connect in the organization. And then it just doubles down and helps the organization create that thriving workplace. Some other elements that are really important as we think about a thriving workplace: psychological safety. I haven't been on every presentation today in this conference, but I'm sure someone either has or will talk about psychological safety, having inclusive behavior, again, recognition. We can never have too much of that, and also valuing those unique perspectives and building trust through everyday interactions. And so, again, we talked in the beginning about kind of why we do these things. And here are just some examples about how you can connect associate impact with organization outcome. You know, if you have associates, again, that are doing their best work, feel like when they come to their organization every day, they're supported by you, understood by you as the organization, and they can really come and do the best work that they can offer the organization, they're going to feel more fulfilled. They're going to be more loyal. They're going to want to grow with the company. And then from an organization perspective, that's going to lead to innovation, increasing your brand and reputation. So when you have employees inside that are saying this is the best place to work, they're telling all their friends about it. And then also just the overall organization performance. So let me just stop here and ask a few questions, or ask if you have any questions, and say, you know, what does a thriving workplace look like to you? And as you think back to the story that I talked about in the beginning about my history professor from high school who got in his car every day during his summer job and screamed at the top of his lungs because the work was just so monotonous. It was not meaningful to him. I would just encourage you to take some of the steps to define your associate value proposition, to think about meaningful work, to think about ways you can engage with your associates so that they don't get in their car every day and scream on the way home from your workplace.
Thank you so much. I'm sad I can't see. I think you have to be logged in order to make a comment. So I don't think we're getting a lot of questions or comments, or at least I'm just going to double check the chat and make sure that I can't see something here. That presentation was wonderful, and I am so impressed with what you all are doing over there. How long would you share a little bit more about how long it took you to develop that AVP process, and then will you be updating that on a regular basis?
Yes. I'm going to think back to 7 or 8 years ago. I want to say it didn't take us longer than 6 months. We could have shortened that up for sure. That seems like a long time, but we could have shortened that up for certain. But at that time, our data that we had from the engagement survey was a little bit clunky, and the exit interview data was also a little bit clunky. And so it really took us time to find the data that we thought was relevant and meaningful. So I think if an organization has that data readily available to them, that's going to make it kind of quicker to get to the end point. And also, if they haven't really defined the personas, like key personas in their organization, if you have those two things, that's going to give you a really great start. And then your second part of your question was, have we refreshed it over? We have refreshed it over time. Yes. We have just refreshed the elements. One of the elements just wasn't as clear in the beginning, and we were noticing that as we communicated, like all of our communications were around 4 of the items, but really not one of the items. And so we went back and refreshed it. And also we updated, some of those outcome engagement statements as well. And that was super helpful.
It's so wonderful. I'm sure you're seeing great results from it as well.
We do. I mean, I really do attribute the turn that we had in our talent metrics to establishing this, because it makes it really clear what we offer. And I think not only by establishing it, by in the communications, connecting it to this. So if there's somebody externally who's thinking about coming to your organization, you can say, these are the things that we offer. And this is how we want you to, we are sincere in saying, this is how we want you to experience them. And then we talk to associates. I'll make an example. If we find that in a couple of years ago, maybe 3 or 4 years ago now, we found that reward was scoring lower. And we were, in some respects, we're like, wow, we're doing a lot on reward, but what can we do differently? So we increased our communication on reward and kind of changed it a little bit to make it more direct. And then we also took some new ways for rewarding associates. And so then we were able to say, hey, we have this as one of our value propositions, but you guys are saying you don't feel so great about it, right? That your feedback is coming back to us saying, like, we're not experiencing it in this way, but here's what we did to listen to your feedback. Here are the actions we took. And then we saw our reward score increase on the next engagement survey. So I think when you can show those successes, and you can show that this is what we value. So if you value other things, this probably isn't the place for you to work.
Right.
But when you give us feedback on it, we take direct action. We say, this is what you said. This is what we value. This is what you said about how you feel about that. Here's what we've done. It really does increase associate engagement, and it helps associates just feel more connected to your organization, which is going to improve your retention or decrease turnover. And then they're going to tell other people about how they feel about it, right? The best testimony is our associates saying, like, you should work here. Like, I'm being treated very well here at this company. And they are a people first organization. And so that we can, and they're telling their friends about it. And then we're clear in how we communicate about it. So when new people come, they're like, oh my God, this is what I heard as well.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I mean, it's one thing to produce it the first time. It's another thing to revamp after listening. I mean, it's really remarkable. Really, wow. Kudos to you and your team. That's awesome.